Painting delicate floral details can feel intimidating, but they don't have to be. Welcome to Sunlit Brushstrokes. I'm Jessica, and in this video, I'll show you how I move from soft to more defined details at different stages of the painting, from wet to damp to dry, so that you can choose the approach that works best for you. Today we'll be building on the value structure we established in part 1. And if you haven't watched it yet, I'll link to that in the description below. We'll be adding detail that supports the realism and depth we've already achieved. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to paint the details on this Amaryllis, and the secret is going to be having damp paper. We don't want to be super wet, but we're going to be kind of using wet on wet techniques, but allowing our paper to dry. Or one other thing that helps is using this Simply Simmons brush. It holds less water than some of the brushes, and so if we don't apply too much water, we'll be able to come on fairly quickly with our paint. So I'm going to come and just fill this shape in with water. Try not to be too sloppy, Jessica, because I don't want to get water on these two petals here. We want to just try and stay still as if we're working wet on wet, even though we are working wet on damp. We don't want bleeding to happen. So I think I'm going to be able to just use my quinacridone rose straight out of the well. It's a little dirty, but it's actually fairly concentrated. I think I can just dip into it, tip of the brush. Let's see how this works. Let's give it a shot and see. So before I go into the very, very fine details, I'm going to come and do almost like a little bit of this softer, you can almost say there's more of a diffused line and then a harder line here. So right now my paper is a little on the wet side, and I'm okay with that. It's allowing me to get these more diffused details that I see first. So I'm going to come in here. Oh, and you can see within seconds, I'm starting to be able to get, maybe my paintbrush is just a bit drier, but all of a sudden I'm getting more of these more hard detailed lines. But let's just come in here and kind of work up to the edge of this. So yes, I'm getting a little bit drier. That's okay. I'm going to just keep putting a little bit more of the softer pink on, and where I want to get softer edges, I can add a little water just with my second brush that's just got water on it, my water brush. Soften that everything, and then come back over here. A little more concentrated paint this time on my brush, and let's see how it behaves. Yes, we're getting nice details. So it's getting a little drier now, and I'm trying to pay attention to the creases and folds in my reference photo. Don't feel like I'm nailing it perfectly, but I'm going to try and get the direction of these creases and folds working here. And you can see I'm only doing one side of the petal at a time because I feel like, maybe I can get this the way I want it to look. If I can't, that's okay. We can let it dry, come in and do the second layer with a little bit more detail. But it looks like it's working. You could do all of your kind of middle pink first with the softer kind of more diffused edges, and then come back in and do these more detailed edges. This one I'm doing it all in one shot, but we'll do some both ways so you can see. It might be easier to just do all the soft diffused lines first. So that looks goofy right there. I'm going to use a wet brush and just soften it. Now I'm kind of happy with how it's looking. I know it's not like done, but I'm going to leave it for a minute. Come and do this side. Now this side should still be kind of damp, but I'll just put a little more water for good measure. And once again, as I said, I'm using this firmer brush. It's getting the water on there, but it's not drowning anything. So I'm going to come in here, and you can see I'm getting, okay, I need a little more water and paint. And we'll get some more of that diffused pink. I want quite a bit of it over here too, because I see things soft over here. So I'm just going to come in, let it kind of just bleed around a bit first and get a little more diffused. See lots of pink here. The pink comes almost to the edge of this petal. So I'll just come up a little bit more, a little bit here, and kind of down into here a little bit. Be careful because there is a very clear white area in this petal as well on our Amaryllis. So we'll go something like so. And I'll just soften the top, and this side I'm going to let it dry before I come in and do those other details. That's going to allow this to kind of just set, if you will, the way it is. Maybe even a little more pink. Let's just put a little more where we have kind of a bit darker color. You can almost see a little bit of that here. It's starting to dry a little bit. starting to not be quite as diffused, but I can blend it with my brush. Good enough, because like I say, we can come and get those other details after. I'm not loving what I did here. This is not straight up and down, so I'm going to use my brush and just soften things a little bit. I'm getting picky, but I think it could have a little bit more of a curve in that pink crease there. So I'm just using my damp brush that had paint on it and just blending that out. So while that dries, we can come and work on our other shapes, and then we'll come in and do some finer details on that after. So I'm going to do every second shape so that things don't bleed. So I'm going to come down here, and you can see you can really work whichever second shape you want. That sounded funny, but we when we painted the first layer, we did these ones first, right? Well, this time we're doing kind of the opposite. It doesn't really matter what way you go. So we'll just fill that shape in with water. Now I am kind of almost drowning here. You can see I've got a lot of paint. That's okay. I think I'm going to go ahead, and I see a lot of the nice soft pink kind of underneath these creases and folds. So I'm just going to get that on there first. Come right up to the edge here. Again, that's what's going to help make it look like this petal is behind this one. And come up a little higher with our pink, or closer to the edge of the petal. And not much over here. This is very diffused, not much detail either. So let's just kind of go like so. And oops, hopefully I'm staying out of the camera here, and just blend that down. And I'm going to put a little bit more along this edge here, because I can see it's a little more pink. And yes, our shadows are more purple than gray, but I like that. I purposely aim for a little more purple in my shadows. So then I'll come over and do this one. Same thing, wet the shape. And there is some nice kind of lines right here, but it's not too stark yet. I'm going kind of soft. I do like that soft diffused pink. It's getting drier. Maybe we can get a few of those. This might be enough detail for this, because it's not even that detailed in the photo. So let's come in here. We'll get a more diffused pink to start with. And maybe over here, we'll see, once again, if we can kind of achieve everything in one layer or not. We'll see. So we've got that. Come back into my quinacridone rose again. Now I'm calling quinacridone rose pink. I'm using those two terms interchangeably, so sorry for the confusion. Okay, the other thing you can do to help yourself here, you can tap your brush off on the edge of your palette to kind of almost get one side of it that's like more pointy, one side will be more straight. You use it kind of like the pointy way on your paper. You can also pinch it and bring it to a nice kind of tip, if you will, like a nice chisel edge. That's going to allow you to get more detail as well. But let's see, things are drying. They're not dry, but they're definitely drying. They're almost past the damp point. So I'll go ahead and just put them on there anyways, and then I'll use my water brush, as I'm calling it, my second brush, and I'll soften them and see how I think this looks. It's not bad. Kind of like that. And I'm also trying to maintain just a little bit of an edge to that, because there is a fold on this petal. I don't think it makes or breaks it if you lose it, but I want to try and maintain it if I can. I never really made too much of a deal of it as I was painting the first layer, because it is kind of in shadow still. But once you get the pink on here, the pink is not in the second, in kind of this folded section. Okay, so I'm just using the tip of my brush. I gotta make sure I don't go in the wrong place for the camera here. And try and maintain or achieve these beautiful kind of creases, folds. They kind of have a curvature to them that I feel like I'm almost botching. So I'm gonna be careful. Let's see if I can kind of maintain that or achieve that. Don't need to be too crazy, but I think that does make the flower what it is, right? Is the creases and the folds and the direction of the creases and the folds. So using water again to try and tap that, because it's getting there. I'm happier now with those folds. Better than they were. Not perfect, but better. Kind of just has like an S shape, almost like a elongated S. Okay, things are getting almost too overworked. I'm overworking this shape. So let's just try and bring it to a close. I'll just tap a little bit out. I'm gonna drop a little water in here because I can see too pink, and then I'll just soak it up a little bit with my brush. Tap it off on my paper towel, soak it out. Definitely picking at this petal, and yet I'm not happy with it. So we'll try and leave it. Maybe we can always come back in and tweak it later. I'm happy with this side of it. Yeah, it's not as bad as I'm thinking it is. Okay, let's go ahead, and I think, well, if this edge is dry, it's almost dry, I might go use the hair dryer, because if this is a little bit damp here, things could still bleed. So I'll use the hair dryer before I do these 3 shapes. And then at the end, we'll come in and do kind of more the crisp or the most refined details. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do these. I'm still not loving that up there, but that's okay. We're gonna carry on, and I can always tweak that at the end. So let's go ahead and do this one. This one has a lot of beautiful detail. Eventually we're gonna get in here, but again, I think it's easier to get the diffused pink on first, the diffused pink lines, and then finally come in with the more detailed ones. But you can experiment both ways and see what you prefer. I'm going to carry on doing the diffused first. And be careful as you come near the green. It shouldn't look bad with a quality paper, but you definitely don't want to drag green up into your tips of your petals. So I'm going to come in with a little bit, like I say, a little more wet. Not as wet as we did that initial purple layer, but more wet than I'm going to eventually get. So let's just kind of follow the direction of the creases and folds here. I'm going to blend this out. I'm actually drier than I would like to be, so get some water on there quicker so we don't get it drying too fast. Not loving how detailed I got down there. Wasn't planning to get that right away, but that's okay. We're just going to blend this around. Like I say, I'm using my brush now with only water on it. You can see it's kind of making an interesting color down here, so I don't want to go overboard with that. Put a little bit of pink along this edge here. I kind of almost feel like there's a slight pink kind of ruffle. And I am quite dry, and that's why I'm having to come back over with my brush and kind of soften and blend a little bit. I'm drier than I expected to be, so let's put more water over here. Obviously didn't put enough water on first time. And I do see this nice kind of pinky color all in here. So I'm just going to come in here and put this nice soft pink. Try and make sure that I maintain that white section in the middle. We don't want to get the pink right into there. We can kind of come up to it a little bit. It's not as much diffused pink actually down there, so let's just do more up here. Put this nice soft pink up along here. And just blend that around a little, like so. Just a little bit more right here. Again, you can see I'm following the creases and folds, even though I'm clearly not getting them very bold yet. I think overall I'm happy with this one. You could have a little more pink maybe up here that's more diffused as well. I actually see it almost as a little bit more of a coral pink. That's optional. You can keep it simple and just keep using the quinacridone rose like we're doing. If you want to, though, you could just tap a little bit more of a corally color there. This one here is just made from like quinacridone, mainly quinacridone rose and Hansa Yellow Deep. Those are my primary colors. I may have had a touch of blue in there, but probably not much. So if you want to, you could kind of get a little bit more. You can see I've got more of a coral red here. And I'm putting it in the tip of this because I see a kind of a coral color. This is nice, but not necessary. This is just, if you want that, you could always make a pinky red with just a little bit more of a yellow undertone to it. Or if you have a red with more of a warm kind of undertone, you could use that up there. Again, nice, not necessary. It's not going to make or break this painting. I could come to a little bit more of a point, couldn't I? If you look at that reference photo, it could be a little bit more pointy. Being a little bit detailed there, but Just pull this down a little bit and just kind of guide these a little bit this way. Okay, let's call that good. That's an extra detail, nice but not necessary. And you can see now I'm just using my water brush to kind of just gently, softly kind of make things nice and smooth at the edge. Okay, let's move on to this one. It does not have a whole lot of pink at all. So I'm also going to wash my brush because I don't see a lot of that coral color in this one. I might put a little here though. If you look up here, I can see a little bit in here and maybe a little bit in the back. We'll see. Again, don't need to use more than one color. So I'll just wet this along here. There is a white edge along this one. You might want to leave that dry. It's a nice detail, but it's not an essential. And very, 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 very little pink here. So I'm going to put just a little bit. So I'm just putting a little bit on my brush, tapping it off so I'm not too wet. And I'm just going to do a few of these creases and folds, and I'm going to call it a day for this one. It's not much of this over here. Try and avoid getting it on the stigma. Okay, so I think that's almost enough, more than enough. Yeah, let's move on. This one has some more soft diffused pink, and as I said, if you want some of that coral color, you can just tap a little bit of a warmer red in there if you have a coral color on your palette, or throw a little tiny bit of yellow into your quinacridone rose. Alrighty, so I'm just going to start with the pink. I can put a little more on my brush. You can see I'm coming straight into my well, and my well is dry, so it's super concentrated in this palette right now. I do like this color. We're going to get diffused all in this area here. Again, try and pay attention to the creases and the folds and what they're doing, the curvature. Okay, this one, just tweak that a little bit with this brush. So this is the water brush. And I'm going to put a little bit down here. Most of this is more detailed, so we don't need a lot of diffused pink down here. And come up here. Again, I'm just putting that very, very soft amount of pink. I don't want to go too stark yet, because we're going to get that in our second layer as we talked about. So just blend this around. I feel like I kind of almost passing the limits here, because we want to keep that center white section, right? And we can come up here and put a little bit of that coral color now. So again, I'm very concentrated. Almost could have a bit of a shadowy color. Okay, too concentrated. I'm going to just come in here, nice and deep and rich and dark, and dry along this top edge. I'm going to tap that color down into my area that's wet, so you can see I'm getting a nice diffuse, soft kind of color here. Getting a little more diffused color here, and I'll just kind of blend it around a little bit up here. And I guess a little bit here. It's more of a soft edge here, but we're getting kind of detailed, more detailed than the flower necessarily needs to make it look good. So don't worry if your flower has exactly the same areas that are light and dark as me along the edge here, because it's, you know, I think the edges are nice if you maintain either the light or whatever the dark. Like, okay, you see the light on this one. There's some light on this. It's nice to maintain that, but it's not going to make or break anything if you end up kind of losing it. Okay. There could be a little bit more quinacridone rose just in this area here, but then we're gonna get more of it on another layer. Okay, this is almost getting a little too dry. I don't mind that. That's kind of pretty, so I'm just gonna let it be. Now up here, it is dry enough, but I might even just tap a very small amount of the coral in here for color harmony. So I don't want it wet and have any bleeding, but I don't think it will bleed because I've got basically like light edges along those two petals. So I think if I just go ahead right now, wet this, just tap a tiny bit of that coral color in here, just in a few spots, just because I think it does have a little tiny hint of that. Again, nice, not necessary. I'm going to tap that in, and then I'm going to go ahead and dry everything. So just do a little tiny bit of this. Just a few more details at the top. Yeah, that's good enough. Let's go ahead and dry things, and then we can come in and do the most crisp details. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and dried this, and I'm gonna come in and basically repeat these steps, but we want to be not as wet. So I'm gonna just make sure that I pull out any extra water. So I'm wetting the shape still, because I do want it to be damp, but I'm kind of just coming in with less water than I did before, and just we'll hope that it is wet enough. We'll see as we go. So let's take just a little bit of the quinacridone rose again. We want to be very concentrated and more on the dry side. Again, tapping it off, you can see a little more concentrated paint even here on my paper towel, just when I tapped here. So you can tell I've got more paint on my brush, but I've tapped it off. I'm quite dry. So let's see, let's try over here again. This is the area I started out and I had some troubles. So I'm almost thinking I'm too dry here. So I'm gonna put a little more water. I was very, very sparing as I put that water on there. So let's try just a bit more. You can see I've got a nice line there, but it was just a little bit too dry, I think. If you like that dry, go ahead and just work more dry. So I'm trying to get these lines here. I'm happier. I think this is nice and concentrated, and I'm happier with these lines. Try and follow the curvature. There is some curvature here still, and I had kind of lost some of it, I feel like, in my last layer, but you can see I'm maintaining more detail because I'm pretty damp. Almost dry. Down here, I think it is dry. It's not acting damp. Create a few areas that kind of branch a little bit. Not too much, but there is a few little branching creases and folds. It's almost overdone up here. Let's just soften it a bit. I think overall, I'm happy with that. Let's see, it obviously looks strong compared to everywhere else because nowhere else has the details yet, but just make sure I've got enough water on this side. Just a tiny bit there too, actually, before I move on. I feel like it kind of a little more pink there. Okay, now here we have some very strong details. Let's see if we can do this. This has quite a swoop, so we kind of have it starting somewhere down here, and then it kind of comes up like this. Just kind of creating these S shapes. Sometimes I think I'm curving a little more than I need to, but just pay attention to your reference photo more than anything else, and you should be fine. I always tell students, like, look at the reference photo and not me sometimes. I sometimes will lead you astray because I won't do things perfectly. That's not too bad. I'm just using some water to kind of tap it around because some spots are getting a little too dry, but I do like the detail here. So just use the amount of water you need to kind of just soften gently and decide how much detail you want. If you want to just come on wet, on dry, you can. I do want a little bit of softness, and that's why I'm hoping that I'll maintain just like having a little bit of dampness in my paper without, you can see some places are getting too dry, and then I'm having to add a little water with my brush and just gently soften, and that's an okay option too. Just give it a little bit up here. A little bit more detail. Yeah, I think that's working okay. It's not perfect, but I'm not minding it too much, so I'm happy. Come in here and just soften a little bit more because the details are definitely getting a little bit softer, a little bit lighter down here, not as harsh, not as stark. Might put just a little more darkness actually right here because this is where it is a little bit more stark and harsh, or I should say just strong color. I don't have all the lines, as you can see, perfectly. That's okay. I just use the reference photo as a kind of a general guide, and I don't worry about getting every crease and fold placed perfectly. And then yes, using water to soften because I am getting a little too dry. It's starting to get more like painting wet on dry and then softening here. And I would prefer in some ways if I could kind of get on with the damp, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So that's okay. I'm getting really detailed on that one. That one I did like the details and I don't know why, but I found that one a challenge. So let's come into the shape down here. This one will be an easier one, which is a nice little break after the last one. This one has some details, but not too many. So just wet that. Might even come after and add a little more shadow color in some spots, especially in that curved area. We don't need to leave it pure white. Okay, so a few details. Let's just go ahead, kind of bring them just a little bit more. You know what? I might even take a little bit of coral in my brush, kind of a combination, just because I think I could actually have a little coral right up here. And I'm kind of a nice stage of damp, I think. I feel like I'm getting the details. They're kind of just coming on here nicely. They're not too dry, not too wet. I really am happy with this. It's a nice small area to work in. Just get some of these little stripes, if you will, creases, folds, and then we're gonna call that done. A little closer. Maybe not as dark as what the reference photo has, and I don't know if that really matters, but put a little bit more with quinacridone rose closer to the area where these overlap. Yeah, I think that's good. Maybe just one more little crease or something here. And I'll soften because that's a bit dry right there. Okay, much happier with that one. Okay, let's go ahead and do this one. Just very little. Try and just kind of create some swings. Sometimes when you are too tight, that's where the other problems can happen. When you're trying too hard, don't ask me how I know about that. I try too hard too often. Okay, enough trying on that one. We're gonna leave it alone. This one, I don't even know if it needs much at all. It doesn't have much for shapes, and I was thinking I was done, but you know what? I'll just put a tiny tap of a few, I was gonna say a few taps of coral, but I didn't want them to be dry. Wet that a little bit better. And just get a few, not too many. You want to be pretty dry here, not too much detail. It's, like I say, I feel like this one was good before, so let's leave it be. And then in this area is where we kind of tried to do it all in one shot. And you know what? I think I'm gonna just put a tiny bit just in this area here of the coral, again, to harmonize things and add just a smidgen more darkness and maybe even a little more detail, because all of this, I don't know, I feel like I'm happier where I've gone diffused and then more stark on top. So that's what I'm happier with. So I'm gonna come in here a little bit more. So I'm just using the coral just so that I get just a little bit. Now you're welcome, as I've said before, just stick with quinacridone rose. I say coral, but my coral is just made with quinacridone rose and yellow. Okay, that's good. Just give it a little more darkness, maybe a little too much, but tap it out. I almost feel like it's bleeding a little more. I'm a little wetter than I'd like to be. Okay, let's do this one. So it's got some really strong details in some places, so we're gonna try and pay attention to that. And I'm putting water everywhere, and I'm quite wet. So I will start in the areas that are a little more diffused first, and then come work my way into this lower section where it's a little bit more, almost like dry on dry. It's almost what it's like, dry brush effect. So let's come in first. Okay, there's a little coral still on my brush, but I'm just coming into the quinacridone rose. And I'm gonna do these kind of details. I almost feel like they're kind of encircling the center of this. So just do these first. I need a little more paint on my brush. I'm getting a little dry. I am quite dry. If you're having struggles and everything's blooming and bleeding around, I'm almost too dry. And I don't like being too dry. To me, it's like a little too controlling, but I think I get a little too controlling when I start teaching. Okay. You can see those little stars happening. I'm just gonna move them around a little bit with the tip of my brush. There we go. And yes, I kind of slopped right there. Let's just lift that a little bit. And I do like how dark it is up here. I think I need a little more paint on top of that coral color. There's more of shadow colors up here too, not just pinks, but work with the pink for now. And yes, you can see that last stroke there, very much too dry. So wet it, blend it. I'm just using some water to kind of blend things around because you see a few spots have gotten a bit on the dry side. This doesn't really have a whole lot for detail up here. I might just put a few small strokes and blend them around. I want them fairly soft because, as you know, it's diffused looking up there. And I think, let's try if we're dry enough down here. This is where things are pretty much like a dry brush effect almost. It is quite dry looking. So let's just try this. Quite dry. And I'm just going to soften it if I need to with the brush, but you almost don't even have to soften that, right? If you look at the photo, it's like, okay, that is pretty dry brush there. Just move it around ever so slightly. Okay, and then down here we have some really interesting shapes too. Ooh, I feel like I'm going to botch it. I got to pay attention to my position here. Yes, I'm basically working wet on dry to get those on there, and then I'll just soften. Okay, that's just needing a little bit of water now, just so that don't look, I don't know, I don't like the dry brush effect as much with watercolor. If you do, you could leave it. And I know this is basically dry brush with just a little bit of wetting, blending, whatever, but I feel like that works for that shape. That shape needed that, I think. So I feel like maybe I could have come not quite as much into this center here. Actually, that pink does actually cross over into that area where there's green, just that little tiny section right there. You come just a little more in, like so, and kind of almost like cover some of the green. I just try and drag that a little bit. Yeah. Except this one kind of working drier than I'd like to be for this section, but I don't quite like how these kind of almost are joining on mine. Doesn't quite look natural, so just blend that out a little bit. It's okay. Not perfect, but it's okay. All right. This one we still need to do now. I kind of worked my way around here, right? Kind of almost, I was going to do jumping around, but things were dry enough. I just carried on with all of these. So this one still has to get done. But what I'm going to do is let this dry first, just so that I don't drag my hand through that by chance. If you feel confident, you can go ahead and do it now. I'm going to dry it and then we'll do this shape. If you're enjoying today's video, I would love to invite you to join my free newsletter. In it, you'll find creative inspiration and be the first to know about new tutorials, classes, and workshops. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, you can find a link in the description below. Now let's get back to painting. All right, so this is dry and we're gonna come in and do those final details. So I will once again wet the shape. Just speed things up as I do that. And then we will come in here and do the same thing we've been doing. I'm not sure if this is going to still be a bit wet, but we'll see. Let's try it. That's working okay. Kind of just make them almost kind of almost branch off from the same place down here. We could even get a little drier, but we're going to just put these on here, and as it continues to dry, we can add a little more detail. So just do what will work for now, and then come back in and just kind of refine as it continues to dry. Yeah, I'm liking that. So let's come over here and do some of these. There's some really nice strong lines here. Not quite liking how I put those ones on there, but that's okay. I will try and just soften them a bit with this brush or drag them around. I don't know. We'll see. It's not terrible, just not quite exactly there yet. This one has some really nice curves happening, so I want to try and capture those. And part of it's just getting your hand in the right position, right? Or getting yourself in the right position to the paper to get the curves working for you. So definitely move your page around if you want to. That'll probably help the situation. I'll try and stay upright if I can here. You can see I'm drying, so the lines are actually a little bit more stark up here, which I don't mind because they kind of are working with this photo here to be so stark up here. I feel like something's a little bit off here. I kind of want a little more dense or something. Again, I'm being really picky. Don't worry about it if you're happy with yours. I just feel like it's getting a little, I don't know, a little too linear, stripey, or too, I don't know, lined up too perfectly. Okay, I'm gonna work almost wet on dry now. Almost dry brush, but not quite. So to get these a little bit darker here, a little more stark, I feel like they could be down in this area. And if I need to soften, I can, but this is almost, I would say, dry brush technique right now. Then I'll just come in and get just a few more details here. I feel like this white section does have a few details coming a little lower. Don't want anything too much because this is fairly light in this area, but you can see they come down a little further. So just soften things ever so slightly. Yeah, I think I'm overall happy with this. I'll just put a little more red right here. But yeah, I think I'm actually liking this one. It's not too bad. And since this area is now dry, I think I'll come in and put some of the details and just gentle soft, I guess maybe then you could just say some gentle soft layers of that pink color. I'm going to go a little more coral back here. It does look a little more coral to me than this. So I'm going to go ahead and just get the color on here. And I'm gonna start out by doing it just really wet on wet loose, and then I'll come in and get some more details. It's really dark. I might even have to come on with another layer of like shadow color to get it to work the way that I want it to. Just blend this around. Maybe just get more water on there. It just feels like it needs a lot of water back here. Everything's just really soft and subtle. And we want it that way because this is not the focal point of the painting. Just go more red in this area, and then I will probably just leave this area here actually as is mostly. Kind of dragged some red there more than I needed, but it's okay. We'll just blend it out, and then I do think, yeah, no, I've got red on my brush, just a slight bit, and that's okay. I'll blend that around for color harmony, and then what I think I'll do is probably come in with a little more shadow color. We'll see. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit of that pinky color up here, so I'm just going to wet that shape. And put a little bit along this top edge. So again, I think I'll dip into the coral. Oof, going a little out of the line, that's okay. Not terrible. Later I'll come in and refine this and get this back shape a bit darker. It could be a little darker than it is right now. The other shape I want to tweak ever so slightly is this one here. I'm just going to put a little bit of water on it. It's kind of pinky water, as you can tell. But then I will just take the smallest amount of that original shadow color that we used, and we'll just stick a little bit along this bottom edge. So again, we don't want to like have it mush into the area that is above it. We want them to look like two separate shapes, but by putting the shadow side kind of along the bottom, which makes sense as to where it would be, and then leaving the top of this little shape lighter, it gives the impression that it's folded, right? So maybe just put even just a little hint more along here. And now you can't see it as darker in the photo right there, but I might even put a little bit more right here to kind of push it behind, because it's behind this one. So give that impression, even though we, like I say, can't see that in the photo. Actually, you know what would be good is to put a little more water in here. We're getting a little fussy, but let's bring in that purple color. I'm going to put a tiny bit of shadow along here again to push this petal behind this one. You can see you can do that. You can come in with shadow color at the end as well. I do like to get that on there first, but that works. Especially if you see areas in your painting that you're like, wouldn't have minded having a little more shadow. Well, this is your chance. You can always just lightly glaze a little shadow color on top of the areas that need it. I see a little bit of shadow in this one as well, so I'm just going to go ahead, again, do a little bit of glazing, nothing too crazy, but I do see some strong shadows here. We do have fairly strong shadows already, but I'm going to just work my way up the side of this petal a little bit and get a little bit darker into here. Again, I might be pushing it a little more than I need to, but that is making that petal here pop a little bit more. I think I like that. The other thing I can do is play a little bit now with these filaments in the middle. What I think I might do for that is take this brush. This is just a shader brush. Mine's getting pretty worn, but I'm just going to make sure I'm happy with the edges. I'm just going to scrub a little bit anywhere I feel like the edges are a little bit wonky first, and then I'll refine them a little bit. They're not too bad, but I feel like some of them were just a bit rough or something. And this is one way, a lot of times I scrub mistakes out with this, but it's also a way you can kind of come in and soften a few things. So like this edge here, a little bit harsh, you can soften it. This edge here feels a little harsh. You can just gently soften it. You have to be careful when you do that, but I feel like that kind of helped. If you like the softer look, I didn't mind the harder line there too, but if you don't like it, that's one way you can kind of soften. Let's do this interesting shape right here. There's a really dark, almost burgundy shape, and I happen to have some color here on my palette from doing Christmas burgundies, so I'm just going to take some of it. You can easily make a burgundy using mostly quinacridone rose, a little bit of Hansa Yellow Deep, and then some phthalo blue to kind of get it to get darker. But I'm just going to try and paint in. I'm just working wet on dry, painting in this interesting shape. I'm trying to draw it on. Hopefully you can here, this is what you can do. You can look at your reference photo, or your reference outline if you want to figure out where that goes. I feel like my shape's a little off, but that's okay. Probably should have looked at this before I started drawing or painting it in. Yeah, it's okay. It's working. It's working okay. Can come a little bit more this way. And I can even use that color a little bit in here because it's so dark that I can put a little of that on top of the green. It will create a shadow for us, and we'll soften that just with some water. If we want a little more green on top of the red, we can. Just gonna put a little water in both these spots. Things are a little bit damp here, aren't they? Because I had wet those shapes, so maybe it would have been better to dry it before I did that, but it's okay. That's kind of wet now, and I'm going to put just a tiny touch more green with that burgundy color. And maybe a little bit of the lighter green in here, just to create kind of a gradation from the light to the dark, or dark to the light, rather. So it's dark and then kind of middle green and then light green, and we'll leave that alone. Make sure that everything is blending properly. You have enough water kind of in this area here so you don't end up with some hard edges. I can always refine that like edge right there afterwards with a bit more paint when it's dry. So let's do just a tiny touch of darker green right in here as well. Gonna have to be careful. You might want to do this when it's dry. Just putting a little bit in there. You have to be careful it doesn't blend into there. There actually is almost a tiny touch of burgundy just the very far edge here, but optional. It's not a make or break. I feel like I've got a lot of damp areas on this painting right now, so I'm gonna dry it and then come back in and do a few more details. Right, so now I decided to try and add some detail to the filaments, but I'm actually coming in as I edit to say, don't actually add the darks maybe the way that I did. I actually think I prefer them white, so I kind of lifted the color a bit later. So I'm just gonna kind of speed through this part so you can see what I did, but I would actually recommend, for the most part, just leave these filaments white, and then we're gonna end up painting a little bit more shadow around them to help them pop if they need it. Yeah, let's just go the white route and we'll just do a little negative shape painting instead. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do a few more details now on this little bud up here. So I'm just gonna come in with darker green, and I'm gonna just do this one section over here. I can come and do the other section after, but I want to kind of start splitting this into two. And so I'm gonna do this part, and all I'm gonna do with this is we already have a bit of detail on there, right? So I'm just gonna take some of my green, so this green here, any green that's a little bit kind of on the olive side would work well for this. I actually have some olivey green here. All I'm gonna do is very concentrated. I'm gonna make sure my brush has a nice tip. So you can pinch it or rub it against the side of your palette and just do some of these beautiful lines here. So not too many. We're not gonna do as many as I see in the photo, but just to have some more kind of details that kind of go along with the little creases, the folds in this flower bud. And yes, there's more actually in the photo than what I even have here. Actually, you know what? I want to go a little lighter there because it's a little darker on the other side. I'll bring this up to maybe a little bit nicer point here. Maybe just a touch more. The further I come over here, I'm not going to go as dark as it is in the reference because it really blends into the black background in the reference, and we're not going that dark. So just taking a little more of this. Oh, sorry, I can't quite see my green here. It's just a dark olive green that I've got going. And I'm really just kind of doing it the same way we did all these little details on our flower where we're kind of damp. And I don't even mind if it gets a little bit more like wet on dry, but I'm happy with this so far. So just painting those details on. My paper is quite buckled at the moment. I will want to iron it after. And once again, you can use a water brush if you want to soften anything or lift anything too. Always lift a few details out. This would be a situation, it would be fine if you had an extra layer of darkness underneath as well. Since I've got that green going, I'm gonna go ahead and just do the same thing on the stem. So we'll just put some water and then some of the darker, this is kind of a dark olive green again, same green, and just paint it kind of more towards the right side. That's more where our shadow is. And something like that, maybe a little bit more. This is actually a little bit of a darker green here. And then I'm just going to lift maybe a little bit out. Oh, actually just tap water in, maybe that's enough. I just want to have a little bit more of a smooth transition here. I think there's a piece of fuzz there, isn't there? Yeah. Okay, a little more dark green. I want to just get a smidgen darker. I actually like that dark green that I've got going. I'm going to put a little bit of that This is almost like a deep Christmas green. I'm gonna put a little bit of it over here. Just painting it right on here. It's probably a little damp over here still, the way it's blending, but I just put it on the far right side once again so we get some shadow. And let's see, yeah, this is dry enough. I'm gonna use the same color over here and just push that color. Maybe we'll separate these two flowers with it, or not the flowers, the petals. Just put a little dark in there and then some water and blend it out. So again, I like having that separate water brush, if you want to call it that, so I can get to the blending a little bit faster. Better yet if you have it like in your hand ready to go. As you can tell, sometimes I haven't had it at hand quite close enough and then it dries a little too much. So always helpful to have it in your hand. Okay, yeah, I like that. Pushed it just that smidge darker and it looks a lot better. And I separated those. And because I was working quite dry, I could do that shape and then come over and do that little one there too. I need to be able to go just a little bit more into the little peak there. There we go. And since we're at it, I might even push this a little more. This is just getting really picky, but hey, why not go a little darker since we can? The area around the filaments is dry enough that I think I can do a little bit of negative shape painting again with my shadow color. So let's throw my shadow color over here. I'm gonna have to be oh so careful and work pretty light. I'm gonna just use like a wet on dry technique at this point to get the details in. And I'm just pushing the dark a little more because I want the filaments to pop a little bit more and stand out. If yours stand out enough because you haven't put as much dark on yours, that's what I hope the case is for you. You won't have to necessarily do this, but mine need a little help. So I'm just gonna work around them, come over here and just blend that out with my water. Just getting a little darker. And we'll go a little darker under here, and that's going to hopefully make this center stigma kind of pop a little bit better. So come in here a little bit with my light purple. So it's just very watery. Even though it looks quite concentrated in my palette, I have a lot of water in my brushes, and that's how I'm getting away with that. You can see some fuzz on here too. Yeah, that's helping. I'm gonna do a little bit more on the other side. I might even do a little bit of wet on wet. So that really helps make this pop. And then we will get those details as well on all these little stamen, and that's gonna help bring this more to life. Because right now this petal is still looking a little bit drab. Put a little bit more of it, especially along this edge here. Actually, it doesn't even matter too much if you get this shadow color going on your, okay, I'm working dry right now. I actually don't mind that. It doesn't matter if you get a little bit of on these actual little stamen, like the pollen part, because they're gonna get a lot darker with the reds, so you can get away with it. Yeah, I'm actually kind of working wet on dry for the most part here to get those details the way I want them. Much happier. Yeah, and one of them feels like it kind of got lost here. I can always try and lift it a bit after, but otherwise I won't worry about it. Hopefully you haven't lost yours, but I'll show you how I'm going to lift it if I can afterwards. So why don't we just go ahead and just put a little more detail in here. So I'm going to separate these ones a little bit. I'm going to do this center with the center little petals here. Put a little bit of the, you know what I might even do? I might even use a little bit of this really dull kind of burgundy color, but I'm going to use it really watered down. It's just going to put more dullness in this flower back here. Kind of, again, knocks it down a bit. Oof, it's not even as dull as I wanted it to be. Let's try this burgundy over here. I want something pretty dull. Dark and dull. So put that along there. And I'll just tap it with some water. Again, don't really want a lot of detail as much as just pushing it, you know, pushing the shapes apart ever so slightly, giving it a little bit of definition. Yes, I'm getting some goofy lines there, but just smooth them out a bit. I think that's even helping. I'm gonna come back in here. This is just a muddy burgundy. If you want to see what it looks like, it's not even exactly consistent on my palette. It's kind of just muddy, but it's kind of what I've got. Just tap some water in there again. Don't really need the lines so much. There is kind of a little bit of a center. I'll go like this. Center line there, but again, I don't want to do too much over here. Do a little bit here. Now I'm working wet on dry, which is going to give me too much detail. So let's blend this out. Again, keep things soft over here. We put a little bit here. I'm going to be careful because I'm getting very close to touching these petals together. But I'm just dropping some of that burgundy color on here, and I think I'm liking that. Oh, I did touch them together. They're bleeding. Do you see that? That's okay. We'll just let them bleed. Bleed a little bit. Just add a little bit of water there to kind of get the edge working for me. Since we're at it, might as well just maybe let a little bit of bleeding happen over here as well. So I'm just going to wet this shape and just let a little bit of that burgundy come down here. Let myself have a case of the shake so I get a little bit of the ruffle along the edge of that petal, and then do something like so, and then see if I can get a little bit of these lines to stay here or not. I don't know. Try this. Kind of just messing around with the wet on wet details. You could do these separately, but because I don't mind them mushing together, because I want them kind of to be like the background. Oof, I'm messing up, aren't I? That's not the direction of these little creases and folds. Okay, let's try a water brush. Tap that around a little bit so we get rid of those lines, and we try it again because I'm not quite, it doesn't matter if you're quite on the same way as the photo right here, but why not? They're curved more like this. Try a little bit more of that. Try and achieve some of that curvature that you see in the photo. Not perfect, better than nothing. And then I'll just kind of blend that around. Might even let that bleed just a little bit over here, and then maybe I'll come in with a little bit of a more shadowy, muddy color in here, just again to keep pushing this back because we want this to be really not standing out too much. So these duller colors are going to help push it back. I'm just going to go ahead and put more of this on here as it's drying. This is what you kind of call messing around because it's kind of just a weird stage of wet / damp. And so I'm just kind of playing with it and seeing what it's going to let me get away with. If it is completely driving you crazy, if you try and do this where you're kind of in like an in-between stage, that's why I just say stop, dry it, and then do it a little more piecemeal the way we did this flower. You don't need to have everything quite as soft as what mine is looking. Because as you know, I just kind of decided to soften things as I went. This is dry enough that I can come in here now and add in these other shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and make a muddy color in my yellow. So I'm just going to take some of the burgundy, one of the burgundies. I've got green in there. I'm going to mush the burgundy, the green, yellow together so I get a golden color. You can use a gold color if you have one, or you can just mix one up by using mostly yellow with a tiny bit of red and then even a smaller amount of blue. That's really what's happened here because the green had the yellow and the blue together, and then my reds are kind of a mixture of everything. So doing sloppy color mixing, but it works. The more you do it, the more convenient it becomes, and you're like, oh yeah, I can just kind of do that. So now I'm just painting these, and I know there's red on them too, but the red will show up on top. So I'm gonna just go ahead and paint them as if everything is this kind of yellowy color. If you want brighter yellow too, I see a few spots with some brighter yellows. I think I'm just gonna skip that and just get the dull yellow on here for now. Oh, that's really dull. Let's go ahead with just a smidgen more bright yellow. And then we'll come in with some more dulls. Okay, this one is kind of barely visible behind this one. So a little bit brighter right here. This one actually, I'll just put some yellow on it, bright yellow, because it's mostly kind of a pinky color. I kind of slopped that. There was more space between them. Oh well. Just going to tap that so it's not quite as intense right there. Just a little more of the gold down here. And then I'll come in with my red colors. So maybe the same burgundy we've been using. And I'll put more of that one on the back of this, back shape. Put a little bit down here. I can always blend things around. I'm just kind of looking at it at the photo and doing kind of like a wet on dry technique. So I'm not doing any wetting first. I'm just kind of dropping this in here, and then I'm going to come in, look at everything and decide, okay, where do I need to add a little more color or whatever. So, and I'm not worrying about the fact I kind of mush those two together. They're just going to be that way. So I'm just going to go like that and add a little water to kind of blend it around so I get a light, slightly more pinky color on this one. This one I'll put a little more gold. Might even lift a little bit of it, this one as well, so I can get a little more pinky looking. Again, put a little bit of that burgundy. Let's put a little more water and tap a little bit of the color out. Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. Then I'll come in, I can always do a few more details after this is dry, but I'm happy with this overall. I don't want them to be, I don't want to labor over these too much. Okay, the other thing I want to try and do, and I'm not sure, actually maybe should have lifted this before I did these, but I could try and see if I can lift a little bit of a filament shape out right there. As you can see, I kind of lost this one that's curving. I'm going to try and lift it out a little bit with my paintbrush. Like I say, should have done it before I put these on here. Would have made it a little easier, but forgot. It's coming. Usually I would use this little scrubby brush thing. I could try that. I just feel like, I don't know, it might be a bit much for what I'm needing it for right now, but let's try it. Just scrub it, scrub it, scrub it, and then we'll tap it with some paper towel. Just scrub a little bit along here, just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. And then again, I'm going to tap with the paper towel. So what I'm going to do is dry it, and then I can come in and just tweak those final details. All right, so to make that filament pop, and like I say, hopefully you didn't lose yours, I'm going to just come in with really watery shadow color. So I've dipped into here and then back into my water so that I can create kind of this, I can kind of put some more of that purple color in here. It's going to make that filament look like it's more, it's popping a bit more, and you'll see it better. So I'll put a little bit of negative shape painting in here. There's a little bit of a shape. Okay, just come a little bit closer to it here. A little bit more. Just put a little water now, blend it out. You can see that's actually bringing it back to life, isn't it? And do a little bit here, because you can kind of see that slight kind of triangle negative shape piece in there between the filaments. So you put that like that. Might even just soften that a little bit in here. And then I'll put a little bit in here as well. It's kind of, again, like negative shape painting between these. Starting to lose one of them. Just lift a little bit right there. So So it kind of gives the impression that there's still some lightness in there. And then I'll come in here and just do just a tiny bit more of that. Again, with this really light purple. So, oof, not enough water that time. It's not light purple anymore. Use some water, blend that out. Okay, much better if we want those little filaments back. It's not the end of the world. I don't think it looked super terrible, but I think it's better now. And I think I can probably put just a tiny bit of green just at the base here. So I've already messed up my yellow. I've got some green over here, kind of at the corner of it still. So tap that off and just put a little bit of it into some of these, kind of at the base. And then over here, I'm gonna go a little darker green. So I'm coming into one of my slightly darker greens. I tap a bit of the darker green over here, just a bit. We want them to still be lighter than the green around them, but it does kind of get a greenish color in there. And it even gets almost like a dull color. So I'm gonna take, I've got over here just some kind of dull, messy color. And I'll just put a tiny little bit, just tap it in here. This is nice, not necessary, but like, you know, it gets a little bit dull at the very top. So tap that in there and then some water to just kind of blend it around. Just makes those filaments not quite as standing out in this area here, because they don't stand out so harshly in here. And that was a lot. That was a lot. So let's go ahead and just put a tiny bit of this burgundy color once again in here, a little bit here. And I'm just doing some very fine details with it. As you can see, it's kind of, you can see a little bit of that burgundy color. You could even use like your rose. Just happen to have some burgundy made. Not quite liking what I'm doing here, but it's okay. I'm gonna put a little bit of quinacridone rose into this mix. Brighten it up a bit on this one. Not perfect shapes, but they work. Maybe a little more darkness down in here. Getting super fussy. But I kind of like the fussy details, I don't know. Maybe I'll just tap a tiny bit of burgundy over here too. Let's get too bright. Yeah, let's call that good. And maybe over here, I'll just put a tiny little bit more of our pinky color just to brighten it up ever so slightly, just along here. So I'll take a little bit of the coral, just put a little bit in this one. I feel like it's a bit brighter up here. I don't want it to be too bold, but we can put a little bit here. This isn't too close to the edge of the painting. I don't like to put anything too bold that's gonna like draw our eye or the viewer's eye away from the focal point of the painting, but I don't mind a little bit of this, just a bit more, to create a little more harmony in our painting, because I feel like this was almost getting almost too disjointed. I wanted it to be somewhat disjointed from this. I want this to pop, but just put a little more of that bright color in there. So yeah, I was kind of working wet on dry, and then I just used some water to blend it around. Worked fairly quickly. And I might, on this one, just go ahead and put some water and a little more shadow color just to get a little darker. So come back over here where we have our original shadow color, and we'll just put a little bit more of it. Ooh, or a lot more of it. I'm gonna blend that out, don't worry. I'm trying to create a little bit of the texture that you see. I will be blending that out for sure. Get those creases and folds there, and then just use some water with my brush and just kind of blend that. I'll just darken that a little bit too. Let it all blend together. Maybe just kind of, coat everything a little bit more. Feels just like it could get a bit darker. I'll tap some water in there so it's not quite as dark, but just push it into the background of it. I'm just going to come over here since I've got water on my brush and just almost glaze that over with a bit more shadow. I know there's wet red on here too, so I'm just kind of going really messy right now, but it's working. Again, it's because I don't want crisp details here. If I wanted a lot of detail and a lot of clean color and clean shapes, wouldn't do that, but I'm wanting to just kind of, like I say, knock that part down. A little bit more light right here. I realized I wanted to add a tiny bit of green still into this bud, just this section here. So let's go ahead, wet it, and just take any of the greens. Ooh, that one's a little, maybe not the right one. Maybe use more of an olivey one. I'll use whatever's on my brush. It's going to be a blend of kind of a dark olive green here. And just come along the edge where these two edges meet. Kind of gets dark and it bleeds into this, you know, top shape a little bit. Just come along there, and then I'll use some water and tap it around. Just slightly like so. Not that, you know, it looked fine without having that, but I kind of liked that in the photo, so I just put a little tiny bit more of that green. Not that it needs much. It can almost have a little bit of this muddy color as well. It could be like more of a muddy green. Just push it a little bit further. Again, just repeating, coming along that edge. Just a little more. Yeah, kind of like so. I could even put a few little wet on dry details over here, just to push the color more so we get darker in there if we want to. Yeah, I'm liking that. Okay, so this is dry, and I just want to separate that one little petal a little bit from this one. Just kind of a nice little optional thing, but I don't know, the way it is right now on mine is kind of bugging me. So just separate it, kind of pull that down, just make it look like that is indeed separate from that one. A little more purple shadow color. Just gonna tap it along there. Actually, the area you see it the most in the reference photo is over here. So why don't we do that? Just keep it dark over there and kind of lighten along here. Just use my paper towel. Just use the paper towel and tap off a little bit right there. Yeah, I think that's helped. At least it's kind of divided it a little tiny bit. And you can always, if you have areas that you want to define, like if you followed me into making everything really soft and you want it more defined, you can always just wet that back shape and then take some of the burgundy or whatever color you want to kind of help define it. Just go along that edge and you'll be able to create a little bit more definition. Just slide this into here. Okay, that's a lot. I'm using my larger brush. Probably better to use the small one right now. Anyways, you can see it's kind of separating that a little bit more. So if we want that look, that's how you get it. And this is maybe non-essential, but we could just try and kind of separate that one out a little bit. Right here, these two seem like they're maybe too joined. Maybe that's getting to be, whoops, just splatter it with water. I'll have to clean that water up before it gets messy. Anyways, that's one way you can separate them if you want them separated. Just tap that excess water off. And maybe define this a little bit. Ooh, that's way too purple. That's one thing when you're working with concentrated paint like this, you do need to kind of be careful. You don't dip into your paint without diluting it enough. whether that's having a wetter brush or however you want to get extra water on there, adding some water to your brush from your little pink cup. But yeah, I want to leave it like that. I think I'm going to call it done. Thanks so much for joining me for this long project. It was so much fun, and I hope that it's brought a little taste of God's beauty and peace into your everyday life, and that it's inspired you to continue enjoying your own creative journey. See you again soon. Bye.